Hi everyone, and welcome to day 2 of our World Watercolor Month Plus Daily Challenge. I hope you've downloaded the 3-page special prompt sheet that we've created just for you from our website, and I hope you also have your paints and your paper and other things that you might need at the ready. I'll be going through the entire prompt sheet with you during this month, and there will also be printable handouts available for you to download for members as well. And on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays, I'll be doing paintings which will go up on YouTube, which will be based on the prompts, and we'll take the whole thing a little bit further. So for today is espresso, which makes you immediately think of coffee. But that's not what we're going to do today. We're going today to look at the two colours, Burnt Umber and Ultramarine. These are two basic colours that belong in everybody's palette, and I'm sure you'll find them in whatever collection of paints you have. If you don't have your paints yet and this is your first introduction to watercolour, then you will find these in any set that you buy from somebody reputable like Winsor & Newton or Daniel Smith and so on. You should find Burnt Umber and either Ultramarine or French Ultramarine. These two colours together can be used to make some very nice paintings, and they're very interesting colours to experiment with. So that's what we're going to do now. And at the end of this session, I will be painting with you a little moody landscape using just these two colours. But first of all, we'll explore the characteristics and properties of Burnt Umber and French Ultramarine. Okay, so let's get started on this. By some strange coincidence, I'm using the Paul Rubens little watercolour sketchbook here. This is the one that I've covered to make it a little bit more individual. So I've just covered it in some scrap of fabric that I had lying around. That wasn't too tricky. This is what it looks like when you go to Amazon to buy it. It's, I think, $9.99 American dollars. And as far as I know, it's still in stock, although, of course, it will be it will be going out of stock. I'm sorry about that. Sometimes that happens. It's 100% cotton paper and quite nice to work in. And yesterday we did lemon yellow, and this was my wet in wet wash, and this was my wet on dry wash. And you can see that there's a tendency for the wet on dry to come out slightly darker because obviously there's not so much water involved on the paper, so it's not so diluted, even if you start off with the same amount of paint at the top. This one's going to go much lighter for kind of obvious reasons. And then we also looked at permanent rose in conjunction with lemon, and we get a kind of peachy orangey colour, which can be varied depending on what the proportions of each colour that you use are. And today we're going to be looking at two completely different colours. All the colours that we're talking about are real strong staples for your watercolour palette, and every relatively serious watercolour painter will probably find that these are the colours that they will turn to time and time again. And Burnt Umber doesn't look very exciting, does it, in the tube? This is a very old tube, I'm afraid. This is from way back in about 1996, I think. I bought this in Mona Lisa in Calgary, and it's coming to the end of its useful life at the moment, but never mind, there's something in here for me to use, and I know full well that it's just as good as it was 25 or however many hundreds of years ago. So I'm just going to squeeze a little dab of that out. If you've only got pans, don't worry. If you look at the video that we did for yesterday, which is online and public, I showed you that you just need to pick up the paint from the little pans and transfer it into your mixing palette. I do heartily recommend that you do that, because trying to do an exercise like this straight from the pan is incorrect. I will say that is not recommended by me, or I don't think any other artist. So there it is in the palette. Just checking you can see me. Yes, you can. Immediately you add water to it, it's going to become a little bit diluted and a little bit paler than it looks in the blob there, which is an uninspiring colour of brown. But as you mix it with the water and make it into a nice wash like that. The more water you add, the lighter the paint will appear when it goes onto the paper. And yes, and if you use it in full strength like this, without any water mixed into it, you can do that. For certain effects you might want to do that, but you don't paint straight from the tube, or indeed straight from the pan. I know I'm hammering on about that a little bit, but it is an important thing to bear in mind. I'm going to do a wet in wet wash of burnt umber here on this page in this little book. So first of all, to do, the brush. This is a Princeton number 8 round, and this one here is a Drawwell number 9. So I think I might use the Drawwell. My favourite brushes come from Japan. These ones are handmade, which is a definite plus if you care about such things as, you know, the legacy crafts and things that we are able to still benefit from in some regard, rather than a machine-made product. If it doesn't matter to you that something's made by a machine, then you're not going to be interested in ordering brushes from Japan, perhaps, because it takes time and effort to do. But when I discovered these brushes many years ago, I've been painting for something like 60 years actually, because in fact even more, because my art journey started when I'm just wetting a square here on this piece of paper. My art journey started before I could write, and probably before I could really speak, when I began to pick up pencils and crayons, whatever was lying around. And I even used to draw on the Misty windows inside our car, because I was born in 1953, and cars in those days didn't have ventilation, let alone air conditioning. You'll probably remember that too. So the windows would always mist up in the back seat where I would sit with my sister. And I used to find myself drawing roses and mountains and things like that on the Misty windows. So that's my art story. Quite a lot of experience. But anyway, there we go. So I'm just dropping in now a little bit of burnt umber. I've diluted it a certain amount. It comes out a nice, it looks like leather to me. It's kind of the colour of a nice pair of shoes. And you can tilt your book a little bit so that things start to run down. And you can then wash off your brush and just encourage the colour to flow relatively evenly. It doesn't matter if it's not completely even. Just gently guide it down the page. There's more than one way of doing a graduated wash like this, but this is quite a good way, and we'll use this in the painting that we're going to do at the end of this video. We're going to do a quick little misty mountain scene, a classic painting that you've seen many times before, but one which is not hard to master, but if you haven't done much painting yet, you know, it's a very good way to start actually. So that's burnt umber. Now the colour that's going to be used in conjunction with that is French Ultramarine, and just for the sake of argument I'm going to stick with De La Rowney, of the same origin, the same age, and I'm just going to pop a little bit of blue in there. And this palette, by the way, is one of Meaden's palettes. We'll put a link in the description. No, I'm not doing this for YouTube. I'll put a link in somewhere for you to find on Patreon or on YouTube or whatever. I'll figure that out later. That's not my strong point. So when you add water to French Ultramarine, you get a lovely, bright, clean blue. Now, both these colours are moderately transparent and moderately granulating. Granulating means that when you paint with it, you get a certain amount of texture. You can see there is a certain amount of irregularity in the colour here as it's drying. I hope that you can see that, the camera is focusing, which is very good when it comes to using this kind of paint for things like old stone walls, painting buildings, trees, and anything natural which naturally has a granulated sort of a texture to it when it's in real life as well as in your painting. So that will help you to create reality or texture or just depth in your painting. And ultramarine as well is well known for being highly granulating, naturally granulating. Granulation is basically in colours like this caused by some variation in the size of the particles which make up the pigment. So some of them are heavier than others because they're slightly bigger, very slightly, but they're heavier and they fall down into the indentations on the paper. So the granulating effect will be much better on cold press paper than it is on hot press, because hot press paper gives a kind of slick sort of effect more than this. This is not very, very textured, this paper. It's quite mildly textured. So you're not going to get the effect as much as you would if you were using, let's say, rough. We hardly ever use rough, but we probably should a bit more because it is different, the same as hot. So you've got your three textures of paper. Remember, you've got your rough texture, which is the most textured of all. Then you've got cold press, which is in the middle, and that's the one that most people use most of the time. And then there's hot press, which is done mostly used for fine art, botanical, you know, anything that needs a lot of detail, things like flowers done very accurately. It's nowhere near as popular as cold press, because cold press is a bit more forgiving, we could say, especially for the beginner. But you know, most artists use cold press most of the time. It's the go-to paper. So there we are. Now, if that doesn't look like a sky already without doing anything particular, I don't know what it does look like. So clearly, French ultramarine is a perfect colour for making skies and so on and so forth. And if your imagination is anything like mine, you're looking at these two colours and immediately thinking about nature. You can't wait to get outside and paint a sky with some trees and something like that, right? Okay, so we'll turn over now, and the next thing we're going to do is just explore a little bit different relative combinations of the colours. And I know I can't do this absolutely accurately, but I'm going to try to do a mix of about 3/4 ultramarine and 1/4 burnt umber, and then 50-50, and then the other way round with 3/4 of burnt umber and 1/4 of blue. And hopefully I can do that sort of approximately by eye with any luck. Okay, so I've done my best here to create pretty much a 50-50 blend of burnt umber and ultramarine, and that should be a fairly neutral grey. I'm not going to say that it's perfect, but it's leaning in the direction of neutrality. So I'm going to just paint a little rectangle of that, and then let that kind of run out to the bottom, so you can see it getting gradually lighter and lighter. And then we're going to go for the 25% burnt umber and 75% ultramarine, which is going to be much bluer because there's only 25% burnt umber and 75% ultramarine. So we're going to get a nice greyish blue because it's mostly ultramarine, but it's not bright like ultramarine. And do you ever have a day when your brain goes on holiday? I think I'm having one of those today. Okay, and then the third one is mostly burnt umber, but if you remember, the burnt umber is quite a brown colour. This is now going to be a greyish colour, a greyish brown, because it's got 25% roughly of ultramarine in it. So there we are. That gives us our graduated wash. A very rough graduated wash, but you know, there we are. So what I'm going to do now is use basically those three muted down shades to paint picture of a misty mountain landscape. So let's do that now. Okay, so now we're going to start on our little painting. I've got a sheet here of watercolor paper, which I think is most likely arches, and it's been taped down onto a board. And the reason for taping it onto a board is so that I can lift it up and tilt it when I'm doing the washes, just to make sure that the water carries the pigment down evenly into the areas that I'm painting. And I've just used regular masking tape around the outside edges of this to give me a clean edge when it's finished. I do use washi tape sometimes, but I prefer not to really, because it does affect the way you see the colours in the actual painting. This is much more neutral and doesn't affect the way you perceive the colours. If you use a brightly coloured washi tape, you will find that it influences the way you paint. So probably best not to actually, if you're trying to do a proper painting, which this isn't, but you know, if you were trying to do something serious, you'd be better off using just this ordinary. You can get this from Meaden as well, another plug for my famous Meaden brand, but they do a very good one. This isn't a Meaden one, and I'm not quite sure how sticky it's going to be, whether it's going to be too sticky. You will find the Meaden one will peel off nicely because it's a low tack masking tape. This one might not be. However, there is a trick, and the trick involves a, as I often call it, a vacuum cleaner. Now, it's not a vacuum cleaner, this is a hairdryer, an old one. And what you do is you just heat, using the hairdryer, you switch it on, that's a good idea, hot air comes out, warms the glue, and it tends to release a lot more easily. So that's a nifty trick to save you ripping your paper. Best way of doing it, I think. And this may very well be necessary for this painting, because I know that as I was putting this on, I was thinking, oh dear, where is my Meaden tape? I don't know, but yeah, it's one of those days. So what we're going to do now is we're going to paint a little painting of a fir tree on a bank, and behind it are several layers of mountains here, furthest away, then next and next and next, and then we have sky. And I think possibly I did tape off that top there, but I'm just going to, this was an option, and now I'm looking at my drawing, I'm thinking, yeah, no, I'm going to take that off. I'll have to take that one first. And this is life in the raw. This is the way things really work. I'm just going to take this one off and reposition it. Okay, I'm going to reposition that a little bit further up. I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, it doesn't have to be absolutely straight. That's quite fine. That's good enough. So now we're going to go to our paintbrush and some water. And I'm going to do a sort of moody, cloudy sky. So we're going to want some grey like this, which is ultramarine with a touch of burnt umber. I'll try and get that the right way around. And if we add a little bit more burnt umber, which is here, we can get a slightly warmer brownish kind of really stormy kind of colours. And one of the ways that I like to paint is to use my colours not fully mixed. A lot of artists will go into that and make a very homogeneous mixture, but I prefer to not do that. So I'm going to pick up some colour and I'm just going to paint it in across the top here with blue and brown. And you can always do more than one layer if you want. So we'll just do this to start with. And we're kind of stopping just over, it doesn't matter if I go over the tree because that's going to be very dark. So I'm just going over where the mountains are going to be a little bit, and you can see the granulation coming up there. Now some people don't like granulation, in which case you would want to use something like cerulean blue for your blue rather than ultramarine, and you might want to use a quinacridone colour for your brown. They don't granulate, so you know that's okay. So we'll leave that like that as the background colour, and I might put some clouds in, or I could put some clouds in later, some streaky effects, but I won't do that now, because if I add more paint into here, I will get cauliflowers. So you have to let it dry at this stage. If you're going to add clouds, you have to add them once it's dry, or you have to add them in the very beginning. Or you could lift out clouds by going in with a thirsty brush or a piece of tissue paper and lifting out some of the paint. But we're going to keep this really simple today. And the next thing I'm going to do is just quickly dry it with my vacuum cleaner. Here we go. Now that should be dry enough. So now I'm going to pick up a bit more blue, and we're going to make a grey, a proper grey without any brown in it really, although we do need a bit of brown to make the blue go grey. So, and now we're going to do our distant mountain, and we're just going to go along the background here. You can change the colour a little bit so that in some places it's darker. Just paint over the pencil lines. We're not worried about pencil lines. It doesn't have to be precise, so we do it like that. And then I might just make it a little bit bluer still, and we can drop in a little bit more at this point because we're still in the early stages, and then wash my brush and just wet down to the next stage like this. And then I'm going to just lift my paper up and let that swirl around a bit. So we get the effect of mist in the valley there. And then, yes, we probably need the hairdryer again. That's one thing about this particular style. Okay, so let's go to the next layer, and we'll make that a bit darker, a sort of slate greyish brown kind of blue thing. And we'll start here, and we'll take our mountain up in the distance like this. Like I said, we can paint over the tree because that's going to be very dark. So then we just wet to the lower edge, let the paint smush down as far as it wants to. Interesting granulation there too. Now, because things are coming closer, they might actually be becoming more a little bit darker because they're kind of nearer. So let's try this. Plenty of blue in there. And we'll come down the edge here. Just wet the area underneath so it can run down again. Don't need to worry about this bit here because that's, like I say, that's where the tree is going to be. And this bit here, it doesn't matter about that either, for the same reason. Now, this next mountain is going to be quite dark and brownish all the way down here, and we might want to vary it by bringing in blue and dropping that into the brown, so you're basically mixing on the paper, getting lots and lots of interesting textures. Going into brown here. And we should be able to leave that to dry all by itself. And we're going to now mix up quite a strong dark colour for the very foreground, and it's going to be majoring in blues and greys and browns. And you can see how that really resembles a natural textured foreground, just by virtue of the two colours being quite granulating. I'm just going to put in some sort of leafy areas here in the bank. And then we're going to paint the tree. So there's the final painting, complete with the fir tree. If you want to watch me painting a fir tree similar to this, we've got several videos that I've already recorded, which you can access very easily. I'll put links into some of them in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'll do my best to give you a sensible answer. Tomorrow we're looking at cobalt turquoise and one other colour, which will be a surprise. So I look forward, in actual fact you can choose whichever colour you like. So I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, and I hope you have a lovely evening and enjoy having a go at this Misty Mountain landscape. So bye everybody, bye for now, bye bye.